Welcome to this week's webinar. This is Sara, the Education Coordinator at the Child Advocacy Center of the Finger Lakes. This week, we're going to be talking about minimal facts versus forensic interviews. This is actually a part 2 where we will specifically be focusing on forensic interviews. If you missed our part 1 presentation about the minimal facts interview, please visit our website or YouTube channel for more information. So let's start just by what is a forensic interview. A forensic interview is really a formal investigative interview conducted by a specialized child forensic interviewer. In this presentation, I won't be going into specifics about the types of questions that are asked or how best to present evidence to a child during an interview. That is because I do not want you to feel as though you are prepared to do a forensic interview. Forensic interviews should only be done by people who have certifications in protocols that are appropriate for forensic interviewing. If after this presentation you have more questions or are interested in becoming a certified forensic interviewer, you may contact me via email at sara@cacfingerlakes.org. Forensic interviewing training is a 40-hour training that must be completed successfully before an interviewer can conduct forensic interviews. Forensic interviews should be done in a neutral setting and is really a fact-finding interview. The reason why you must be certified is because this important step in an investigative process can really change and alter the outcome of an investigation of child abuse. Forensic interviews are also conducted in a child-friendly environment. Typically, these will take place at the Child Advocacy Center. And our interviewers primarily rely on open-ended questions to elicit narrative from a child in a non-leading way. The goal of a forensic interview is to obtain a statement from a child in a developmentally sensitive, unbiased, and truth-seeking manner that will support accurate and fair decision-making in the criminal justice and child welfare systems. I just want to share with you the Child Advocacy Center model, goals, and benefits. We have several goals that we are trying to reach and maintain at the Child Advocacy Center. One of the first is to reduce trauma to the child and family. It's important that a child only be asked these sensitive questions as few times as possible. That is why during a minimal facts interview, we are not asking very specific questions about the abuse, but are really just trying to determine that the child is currently safe or will be safe until a forensic interview is completed. The forensic interview itself or retelling of a story can be very traumatic to a child or family. During a forensic interview, we want to make sure that we are providing excellent services with highly trained professionals. This is so we can best minimize or reduce the trauma that the child and family experiences. Some of the ways that we do that is by reducing the number of duplicative interviews and examinations a child must endure. Every time there's a forensic interview, we strive to have that be a one and done type situation where the child only has to come in and tell their story one time. This is managed by having our entire team that will be working with the investigative process at the Child Advocacy Center at once. Although the forensic interviewer is the only person in the room talking to the child during the interview process, members of the multidisciplinary team, including law enforcement, CPS, and in some cases prosecution, will be in another room where they are on a closed loop monitor and can hear and see the interview live. We are improving the quality of interviewers by encouraging peer mentorship and videotaping, as well as ongoing training. All of the forensic interviewers in our counties should be participating monthly and quarterly in peer mentorship program. During peer mentorship, they discuss difficult cases, new strategies, and ways that they can improve their interviewing process. This is also used by reviewing videotaped sessions of an interview. We also are hoping to improve investigations and prosecution of cases by reducing the number of recantations. And finally, we do also provide advocacy at the Child Advocate Center. Advocacy is given to non-offending caregivers to help better inform them and develop stronger supports for the child and family. Advocates will greet the child and their non-offending caregiver as they enter the Child Advocacy Center. They will then remain with the non-offending caregiver in our waiting room while the child completes their interview. At this time, they can answer any questions to the best of their ability that the non-offending caregiver may have, and they can also provide support and services that will help with the child and family's current and ongoing needs. So what happens before the interview? There's some preparing to do. Our interviewers and the rest of the multidisciplinary team will meet to discuss some things to keep in mind. Some of those things may be whether or not the child has a disability. Although their chronological age may be one thing, their developmental age may be something different, or they may have a disability that interferes with them being able to answer or process specific questions. We want to make sure that our forensic interviewer knows these in advance and is able to phrase their questions in ways that will meet the needs of the child. Does the child need other accommodations? Are there cultural considerations to keep in mind? Does the child have special interests or hobbies? This is a way for the forensic interviewer to begin their conversation with the child. If they can establish some common ground with the child, it'll ease them in to the more of a natural conversation regarding why they are actually there for a forensic interview. We also want to keep in mind the child's family composition and living arrangements, as well as their schedule. Having a young child come in late at night is not ideal. We also try to avoid, the best of our ability, times around meals or directly after school or athletics when a child may be tired or hungry, and that may contribute to difficulties during the interview process. Other things to keep in mind are their medical conditions or medications. This can sometimes coordinate with the child's schedule. If they take a medication that makes them feel drowsy or irritable, we wouldn't want to have the interview scheduled for that coordinating time. We also keep in mind their mental health, who their supportive caregivers are, and any possible motives for false allegations. Prior to a forensic interview, there are some other things that we like to discuss. Typically, CPS and law enforcement cases are reported to the CAC. Caseworker or law enforcement will call the CAC to schedule a forensic interview. The cases that come into the Child Advocacy Center for a forensic interview must be coordinated with law enforcement. There are some instances where Child Protective Services is not involved, and that is because the alleged perpetrator is not a family member or caretaker of the child. However, law enforcement will always be involved in forensic interviews. This is because they're the gatekeepers for recordings. All recordings that are done at the Child Advocacy Center will be released upon completion directly to the law enforcement agency handling the case. This is to better maintain chain of evidence. A child advocacy specialist will be notified and assigned to work with that child and family. Currently, we have child advocacy specialists who are co-located directly within the Child Advocacy Center at our main location in Canandaigua. Child advocates are a key role in the investigative process and are the only member of the team who can continue to work with the family even after a case is officially closed through Child Protective Services or law enforcement. Finally, all of our Child Advocate Center cases are reviewed monthly. Each month, we conduct a case review or CART meeting in each of our 3 counties. At this meeting, only members of the multidisciplinary team are able to discuss current and ongoing cases. Once cases are closed, they are removed from the agenda. And I apologize because this slide should say forensic interviews, not minimal fact interviews. But what we're looking at here is that the knowledge of how to interview young children properly is not intuitive. Not everyone has the skills that are necessary for properly conducting a forensic interview. Most professionals do not have extensive training in interviewing young children about abuse. The people who are conducting minimal facts interviews typically are our first responders. However, forensic interviews are done by specially trained professionals. The circumstances when first responders see the child are often not appropriate for conducting an interview of a young child at that time. This is because in some instances, the offender is actually present when the child is having a disclosure, or if the first responder is responding to a 911 call or a domestic disturbance, then there is likely things that need to be considered before conducting an interview. A non-offending parent or other individual may be present when first responders speak to the child, and they may have told the child that he or she does not believe the child. Having a non-offending caregiver tell you that they do not believe you can be very detrimental and discourage you from speaking to first responders or others. A non-offending parent or other individual may be present when first responders speak to a child, and they may have told the child that he or she is not to tell anyone what happened. This can be especially hurtful if the child feels that they're in danger, but they've been told not to share what is happening to them. This can cause a lot of conflict and confusion for the child. The child may not be ready to disclose their abuse to the responders. This could be that they don't feel safe or comfortable in the location that they are, that they are scared or intimidated by the first responder, especially if that first responder is someone of law enforcement who is currently in uniform or who has a weapon on them or someone that they were told to be fearful of. It could also be CPS coming to their home for a home visit and having either the offender nearby or having been told that they were going to be taken away from their home and their family by other parents, guardians, or relatives. And the child's initial disclosure may have been frightening and upsetting. These are all really key things to keep in mind. So, what happens after the forensic interview? So, like I said, prior to a forensic interview, we will have already received a report of suspected child abuse. At that time, our first responders will have went to conduct a minimal facts interview to make sure that the child is not in immediate harm or danger. And if there is harm or danger immediately involved, they will have to provide some kind of safety planning until the child is able to come in for a forensic interview. Following the minimal facts interview, a member of law enforcement or the child's CPS caseworker will contact the Child Advocacy Center to schedule a forensic interview. and coordinate a time where the entire team can be involved, including the advocate and possibly prosecution. When the child arrives, an advocate will greet them and their non offending caregiver and sit with the non offending caregiver while the child is with a forensic interviewer. Following the interview, we will discuss as a team any further steps. If during the interview there is a disclosure that leads the interviewer or team to believe that this child should seek medical attention immediately, that will be our next most logical step. We also want to make sure that that child has a detailed safety plan, that the interview was successfully recorded and that note taking has been completed, and that we have a very detailed report of the disclosures that were made. Whether or not there is a medical done following the forensic interview, um, there may also be a court process, and non offending caregivers and children may have questions about this process. Non offending caregivers will be given the opportunity to talk to the multidisciplinary team following a forensic interview to let them know what the process will look like for them and their child. They may need to conduct further interviews, especially if there were other children involved in the disclosure. Advocates will also provide further referrals. This can be the medical referrals. It could also be for counseling and other support services. If a family or child is in danger and they need safe housing, an advocate can work with them to find them safe housing, whether it's short term or long term, and they can also help them get supports through their county's Department of Social Services. So, what can we tell the family about the interview? A lot of times, non offending caregivers will ask if they can watch the interview or sit in during the interview. Unfortunately, this is not something that would be common practice. We do not allow families to watch or sit in on interviews because it's supposed to be a comfortable, neutral setting for the child. Families may also ask what to expect. All of our advocates will provide families with a folder full of information on next steps, information about how to best support their child, as well as contact information for the team members and who can bring the child to the interview. Only non offending caregivers should be bringing children to the interview. That means that the subject of a report cannot bring the child to an interview. In the case that there is no non offending caregiver, the child may be transported to a forensic interview by foster care, their caseworker, or another individual that is providing a service. This is important because we want the child to feel safe and comfortable at this Child Advocacy Center as well as when they leave. Again, if you missed part one of this mini series and want more information about a minimal facts interview, I would encourage you to check out our website, cacfingerlakes.org, where you can view all of our weekly webinars, or visit our YouTube channel. If you have any further questions about either the minimal facts interview or forensic interviewing, or interested in how you can become a forensic interviewer, you can email myself, Sara Flack, at sara@cacfingerlakes.org.